The next witness is Phillip Goff. Phillip Goff is the co-founder and president of the Center for Policing Equity. He also serves as the inaugural Franklin A. Thomas Professor in Policing Equity at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Dr. Goff received his PhD and MA from Stanford University and the AB from Harvard University. Dr. Goff, you may begin.
Thank you, Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Jordan, members of the House Judiciary Committee. I want to say that we mourn with you. And to Mr. Floyd, I want to thank you especially for your powerful witness in front of this body and the entire country. I offer my deepest condolences for the circumstances that made your presence here necessary. I want to say that your words have moved a nation that was already mourning with you. To everyone gathered, it is my honor to be back before the committee to provide testimony on policing practices and law enforcement accountability. My background and training are in behavioral science. I am the inaugural Franklin A. Thomas Professor in Policing Equity. I was a witness for the President's Task Force in 21st Century Policing, a member of the National Academies of Sciences Committee that issued a consensus report on proactive policing, and was one of the 3 leads on the recently concluded Department of Justice-funded National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice. But I am likely best known for my work with the Center for Policing Equity, a leading research and action organization focused on equity and policing, and my testimony today is in that capacity. CPE maintains the National Science Foundation-funded National Justice Database, which we understand is the largest collection of police behavioral data in the world. Our work focuses on combining police behavioral data, psychological survey data, and data from the U.S. Census to estimate not just racial disparities in police outcomes, such as stops and use of force, but the portion of those disparities for which law enforcement are actually responsible and can do something about. I have to say that what we have seen in the streets of the United States over the past 2 weeks nearly defies description. Some have called it massive protest, others have called it a riot, others have called it a revolution. What I am confident is that what we have seen has been larger than the incident that sparked collective outrage and is still tearing at the fabric of our democracy. What has spilled out onto the streets of this nation is even larger than our grief at the brutal extinction of George Floyd's life and the life of the thousands of citizens per year killed by police, a number that has not changed significantly since newspapers began cataloging those numbers in 2015. What we're seeing on the streets of the United States is a past due notice for the unpaid debts owed to Black people for 400 plus years. If the responses to this moment are not proportional to that debt, I fear we will continue to pay it with interest again and again and again. Turning to the complex issue of police reform, I applaud the work of Chairman Nadler and Congresswoman Bass for putting forth a comprehensive proposal to rethink how we best hold law enforcement accountable to the ideal of equality. The Justice and Policing Act of 2020 contains a number of critical reforms, including banning neck restraints and creating a national registry of police misconduct. In my capacity at CPE, however, I want to spend a moment focusing on what science says about bias in policing. I feel it's important to set a baseline, especially with all of the false information circulating in media, given the general vacuum in the ecosystem on evidence in this area. First, there is no doubt that Black, Native, and Latinx people in this country have more contact with law enforcement than do white people. There's also relative agreement that where there are fewer public services, so fewer drug treatment, mental health, job training programs, law enforcement has more contact with residents. There is evidence of racial bias in who was contacted by police and who was targeted for force. However, it is also the case that clearly not all the disparities we see are from police policy or behavior. It is some, but not all. Given this understanding of bias in policing, what are we to do? As we've already heard today, the most recent debate is between institutional reform and defunding the police. While there is no quantitative research literature on abolishing policing, there are reasons to believe that many within Black communities are not fully aligned with this vision. Historical and polling research reveal that Black communities support less biased and less deadly law enforcement more than eliminating it. With the mood of the nation changing so quickly, so too may these attitudes. And still, to the degree that a path forward involves using police budgets to invest in Black communities, the process must be led by evidence. Evidence about what programs work, both in policing and in communities. and evidence about where cities can safely receive a higher return on their investment in community empowerment. And regardless, there is no need to wait for a decision on police budgets to invest in our most vulnerable communities. Wherever the country lands on police budgets, we can all agree that communities that have the resources to solve their own problems and do not need to call the police in the first place are safer communities that are better equipped to realize the American dream. There is no reason to avoid this obvious truth, and there is no reason not to act on it now. As I previously mentioned, the Justice and Policing Act of 2020 contains the best federal police reform package of the bills I have seen before this Congress, and CPE supports its passage. Many of our partners in law enforcement, the chiefs who are experts on public safety, support many of its provisions, especially the federal ban on neck restraints and the implementation of a national registry of police officers who have been fired for misconduct. These reforms are long overdue, and such common sense reforms should be enacted immediately.
Thank you very much.
More specifically and briefly, I want to emphasize the need for a national registry of police officers who have been fired for misconduct is a reform that will increase transparency and the public's trust in law enforcement agencies. Doctors and lawyers, those tasked with protecting life and liberty, as officers have to do both on their jobs every day, those, along with many other professions, are required to be licensed, and their employment data are shared across state lines by appropriate entities in appropriate ways. Without such a registry for law enforcement—
Dr. Goff. Your 5 minutes have expired.